All right, first up, for decades, India's aerospace and defense sector have been held back by a crucial gap, that of a lack of indigenously made jet engine technology. You have fighter jets, you have drones. The country is relied on foreign imports, often navigating complicated supply chain constraints. But now, a bold new effort is underway to change that. DG Propulsion. We're going to have the founders with us on air in just a second. They're an Indian startup that is building the country's first indigenous jet turbines. And behind this ambitious mission are two men. One is a mechanical engineer who built and tested prototypes from scratch. The other is a former naval aviator who knows firsthand what dependence on foreign tech means for national security. So, how close is India to producing its own 100% indigenous jet engines? What we mean when we say that is a jet engine where all the components are from India. Are we very far from that dream? What is it going to take to get there? To tell us this and more, to discuss it in full, we have former Indian Navy officer Chirag Gupta is with us right here in the studio. Chirag, thank you for joining us this morning. We're also joined, and you can see him already online, mechanical engineer Prateek Dhawan is also joining us live. Prateek, Chirag, you're both co-founders of this entire company. You're together in this lifelong mission. And right now you've got quite a lean team. I believe it's about 5 people large.
5 people,
that's
right.
Very, very lean team that's been building this. And let's just come to you first to get to know a little bit about your story, if that's all right. So, Prateek, if we could come to you first, take us back. This is a decade-long dream that you've had. Take us back to your initial days creating this. Let me just tell our audiences, you run a YouTube channel. The entire platform has a YouTube channel where there are old videos where one can actually see you testing out your initial prototypes years ago. Prateek, take us back. What's the story? Why did you decide this is the thing I want to work on?
Hi, Toya. Good morning.
Morning.
First of all, I really like you said it's a 5 people large team. We definitely are a large team since we have already tested our jet engines here in India. So this goes way back when I was still in college. So this all started as a passion for jet propulsion or jet engines per se. And we quickly realized that this is a huge gap in the Indian manufacturing market. Very few or absolutely no private companies were doing it back then, but it sort of started as a passion project, and then we kept on building over that. We built our first proof of concept back in 2015, 2016 timeframe. That was just to prove that the physics works, to get it working. That yeah, ye chalta hai, kind of a thing. This thing starts, this thing runs. It was a box kind of a thing in the beginning, just a turbocharger with a combustion chamber strapped to it, and definitely not looking like a jet engine back then. Then, after meeting a lot of really influential people up in the command, we realized they had to import. By the way, they still have to import a lot of these engines from foreign countries. It's a huge market. We found that gap, and we kept on building it with our 5 people large team, with our lean team, and that's how we reached here. So that's kind of a very, very,
I know you've really
journey.
summarized down what a decade of work has looked like, but we'll come to you in just a second for more questions.
Yeah.
Chirag, can we now ask you, because our audiences again will not know this, but for your co-founder, this was a decade-long journey. You found him somewhere midway. What was your own career trajectory there? It's not every day that one meets someone who's belonged in the Indian Navy, but who's decided to shift paths entirely. So what was that light bulb moment in your head that this is something I want to be doing?
So what had happened was that in my career in the Navy, one of the aspects which I did see was that a lot of components, a lot of machines, a lot of equipment is imported. So the question has always remained, why not make in India?
Right.
And when I left the Navy and was looking around and I met Prateek, the idea of make in India engines struck me as something which we can do. And that's how we started talking and decided to collaborate and set up the DG Propulsion company in 2019. That's the crux
the
of
genesis
the
of
genesis.
the story. Right.
And that was the time when the Prime Minister had come up with the idea of Make in India. So that kind of struck a very positive note between the two of us, and we decided to go forward.
Okay. Now, let's just take this next question to Prateek. Prateek, you know, for common bystanders who aren't from this sector, this Make in India sometimes can feel a little confusing. Why is it so difficult to make in India? It feels just off, you know, when you first hear Make in India, this is the country's goal, it feels like something that should be very obvious, because this is something where, this is a sector where intelligence is very important. So of course you're going to want to make in India. But why has it been so difficult in the past? And just give us a layout of the land. What are the other big companies out there? Are they largely government owned? Are they largely private? And what % of these jet engines that are already on the market are make in India? So 60%, 40%, how many components are coming from abroad? Give us the whole lowdown.
So right now, most of the jet engine development is being done by the PSUs or the government-owned institutions like HAL and DRDO's GTRE. Because it's so capital intensive, this entire thing of building jet engine, most private companies have shied away from putting in the capital required. And number two, it's a long-term investment, right? So you really have to invest the money and keep at it till you get the right product out of it. It's purely hardware. It takes years of development, years of testing to get a proven jet engine. So that's why most of the efforts have been done by just the government PSUs. And matter of fact, DG Propulsion is one of the first privately owned companies who are trying to enter this market, right? And they are actively developing and testing the jet engines. The reason it's difficult is because it's a big super system as a whole. It's not one component. It's like amalgamation of number of components, from the compressor stage, the combustion chamber, the turbine stage, different alloys needed for the hot section components. Then there comes the metallurgy. So it was very difficult, and it's still difficult to get all these things working in a conjunction in a really good way, so that your engine runs normally. And then on top of that, you have to spend years on testing to get the data, to get them working optimally, right? So there is huge capital investment required to make these components. The supply chain is not set up yet, at least for the private buyers. Then it takes years to get them together in a system. It takes a lot of system engineering, and that's what DG Propulsion has sort of excelled at. And then it takes more years to test these things so that they are reliable, they are flight reliable, right? I mean, the lives of the pilots, they depend upon these jet engines working rightly.
Right.
You cannot just bypass that.
So, you know, the interesting thing is that when we talk of jet engines, in one's head, automatically the idea is something huge. But actually, the jet engines you create can be quite small. They can be quite nifty. I've seen, Prateek, you hold them sometimes in interviews up for the camera. They're quite small. Chirag, if we could come to you then to ask you a little bit more. A two-pronged question. First, tell us, when it comes to DG Propulsion's creations, so 2019, I believe, is when you'd started out. Last year, about 18 months ago actually, is when you were able to put jet engines for the first time that we could call made in India out on the market. But as you were telling us right before we started this interview, there's still a long way to go, not just for your company, for all companies out there, in terms of the percentage of that one jet engine that is India made, correct? There's still a journey. Can you just give us an understanding, maybe using rudimentary percentages? Right now, for example, 50% is made in India. The goal is obviously to get to 90%. Just give us an example like that to understand.
So what happens is, like our engine, the DGJ40 engine, right now the percentage is about 30 to 35% is made in India components.
Right.
The aim of ours is to get it to about 90%. That's what we are looking at. For that very purpose, the Ministry of Defence has given us an award, IDEX grant, to indigenize the components for this particular engine. Idea is to make it self-reliant, and what we are trying to do at this point in time is develop the ecosystem, develop vendors who can manufacture different components, identify sources from where we can get raw material from which the components can be made, and that's a journey in progress. We have identified a few firms within India who are capable of manufacturing components for our engine, and we hope to test them in the next couple of months' time.
Okay. And Prateek, if you could tell us, if again I asked you to break it down for the lay people watching, all of us, and use non-technical terms, what's the sexiest part of your jet engines? I know there's a lot of innovation that goes on behind the scenes to create the technology we're seeing. What sets them apart?
I'm really bad at summarizing everything in layman terms, but I'll try my best. The most sexiest part is the combustion. I really like the combustion. Harnessing the power of fire is the most sexiest part about these engines. I mean, think about it. All of the power that this thing is making is literally confined in this much space, right? All of the fuel is burning in this much space, and it's not melting materials, right? That's why our engines are running. So that's the most sexiest part. But then another thing, another sexiest part is seeing these engines being run, testing these engines, testing your product live. You cannot get enough joy out of it.
Can't match that feeling.
You cannot match that feeling. Every time there's so much adrenaline rush. I mean, I literally want more people to come and see our engines running so that they know how it feels like.
Okay, so coming to that question of, you just touched on, you want more people to see it. And one of the things we've been talking about is just how difficult funding has been in this entire sector. And Chirag, let me just come to you to ask you exactly that. Walk us through what the funding journey has looked like. Because on one side, obviously, we say that we want to support, as a country, we say we want to support indigenously made products. Walk us through, though, what the actual process of getting funding for something like this, where it's really, really cool, but it's also very out there. That's the message we're taking home again and again, that you are a very, very rare, unique company. Does that make funding hard?
So far we have not got any funding. Let's put it this way, that we are bootstrapped. Both Prateek and we have been putting in our own money to develop the product and the prototype so far. The funding journey is challenging. One does see a little bit of skepticism when you go and talk to people, that an Indian company is able to manufacture engines, and that to jet engines, considering what has been going around and the kind of news that we get to read every day. The aspect which does come to the fore is that most of the times funding is going to companies which are more in the fintech or perhaps the aggregator space, because that's where the VC see a fair amount of return on their investment over a very small period of time. In our case, the journey has to be a little more extensive. It has to be for a longer period, and it requires a little more funding than just a mere, any figure you put across. It has, which means that the people have to be more patient.
Hardware typically is a difficult sector in the sense that there's that need to demonstrate the product. It's a complicated situation. Prateek, if we could just ask you to weigh in here, because this is the most important question we're going to ask today. When it comes to what this ecosystem needs to change about itself, obviously point one is funding. It's the fact that funding should not be so hard to come by. But what else? Walk us through everything that's needed.
So exactly what Chirag touched. I mean, a lot of funding goes to the software and quick scale startups, right, which can scale quickly and get the returns in 1 or 2 years timeline. So we need more VCs, more investors who understand the space, who understand jet propulsion, who are willing to fail. So that this is the most important thing which I want to put across. Many of us in the D-Tech startup, we should be ready to fail, because failing is part of the journey. And another thing, a lot of things has to change on the funding aspect, in a sense that this thing needs really a lot of initial capital investment. So any investor coming in, they should understand the space. And we definitely need more government support as well for this ecosystem, because a lot of this development was initially done by all of the government PSUs and all. So we need their support. We need more testing facilities per se. We need to test our engines. We need to certify our engines. So the government labs, they should be open for us to get our engines and test them, so that they are up to mark what we are telling them to be out in the market. And definitely the supply chain is not set up at the moment. for the private companies. I mean, you go out there, you look for a component to manufacture, to source. There is essentially absolutely no supply chain setup. You spend more time finding the right suppliers, finding the right materials, and then on top of that, there are MOQs which not a small startup can afford, right? So there has to be a big supply chain. So the entire ecosystem needs a bit of shuffle to happen. So more startups should come in the picture, and there should be a robust supply chain.
You both have said in your answers that you have both put your own funding into this, and that is just frankly, again, as a layperson, that is insane. Just to imagine that you've put your own life savings into building this. I know it's usual for founders, but it is still just insane to hear. Can you tell our audiences very quickly, Chirag, because we do have a few minutes, and I do want to leave the mic with you guys and ask you, what's your dream for DG Propulsions?
Well, our dream is to make it the engines, make it completely made in India. Increase the size of the engines, and at some point India should be self-reliant in the jet propulsion technology. We should not be dependent on any foreign OEM, which is liable to make us vulnerable to geopolitical considerations. Our aim is to have a jet engine which is wholly made in India, where we can export it to the world. It's not only in the small engine turbine segment. As we go forward, we would like to make it into the manned space jet engine
Right, we didn't
technology.
talk about drones and
That's
just the
right.
huge expansion
There's
that's
a huge
happening there.
expansion over there.
Yeah.
And we want to leapfrog the technology, and literally these kind of jet engines can be used to make a man fly individually. I mean, we can literally bring a man to fly individually in India. Right now, you're doing it by airlines. You can have urban air mobility. You can have a jetpack. You can have a hover bike. Those are the kind of things which can make a man fly or a person fly in India. Perhaps we can take the journey over there for every Indian.
So you're saying that lots of dreams that we can paint,
Yes.
but that first crucial puzzle piece, finance, that needs to be solved first. Prateek, I know you highlighted more problems, supply chain, for example. We didn't get to double click on that, but I really do see the foundational block of finance as being the first step. All right, India, you're listening. I hope this has illustrated where the ecosystem is, but also what the ecosystem needs to truly propel it forward. All right, Prateek, thank you for joining us. Thank you, Chirag, for giving us all of these details,
so
breaking
much.
this down for us.